All right, well, welcome everyone. I'll bring up my slides in just a moment. Just wanted to say hello to everyone joining into our discussion today. And today, myself and my team from McLean Hospital are here to talk about strategies that parents can use with exquisitely sensitive children. And this comes out of work that our team started several years ago when we started working with a family-based program with for DBT and with kids and their parents. So let me get this going here. So our goals today are, we have three major goals, where one, we want to introduce the transactional model and talk about that model as a way to understand interactions between kids and their parents, particularly kids who are exquisitely sensitive, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. And then to use that as a way for parents and kids to understand their interactions, but also for a way for providers to understand those interactions so that we can possibly have some possible strategies for these families to use. After we talk about that, we're going to introduce some emotion self-management strategies and finally some validation strategies so that parents can understand their children a bit better. And to do this, we're going to use an example of a family, Emmy, who is 10 years old, and Emmy and her moms, Jen and Jess. So to understand Emmy, this is an example that we're going to use. Emmy is a 10-year-old girl who is in 5th grade. And Emmy describes herself as very sensitive. And her parents concur with this analysis, and that she's always been very sensitive to emotions, tends to have really big reactions to those emotions, and tends to just have a hard time managing those emotions. So something like a big event might happen. So for example, Emmy was at school, found herself alone in the lunchroom. No one seemed to want to sit with her. She started having judgments that everyone hates me, and she became really distressed about this. And this just played over and over in her head until on the way home, she ended up grabbing her pencil sharpener out of her lunchbox, out of her bag, and then used that to self-harm. She got home and the model continues. So when she gets home and she's already self-harmed, she gets home and her mom says, "How was school today?" And she says, "Oh, it's fine." And we talk about that as an accurate expression, right? Here's a kid who was alone at lunchtime, feeling really judged about that, and just saying that she's fine when she's obviously not fine. Mom might respond with something like, "What do you mean you're fine? You don't sound fine." And then she says, "Just leave me alone." And she runs up to her room and slams her door, right? Her arousal goes up even more. Maybe she engages in some other dysregulated behaviors, and this kind of goes round and round and round. Now, parents have a role in this model as well. So parents come into any transactions with their kids with their own vulnerabilities. In this case, Emmy's mom's, Jess, is an event planner, and she's just landed her first big contract. Jen is an attorney who is really hoping to hit partner one day. And so they're each coming with being vulnerable. And when we're vulnerable as parents and we have high vulnerabilities and are very stressed, that is not when we tend to be our most validating selves as parents. In addition to this, they know that Emmy at times self-harms, and they know that school is hard for Emmy. And so when she comes home and declares she's fine, when they pretty sure she's not, they get aroused as well. They have their own emotional arousal, and they may have their own judgments. Why is this so hard for her? Why can't I help her more? What kind of parent am I? Or they may have judgments about her. Why does she do this to us? Can't she just be a normal kid? So what tends to happen is their arousal goes up. They tend not to be very validating. When Emmy might say, "Everybody hates me at school. I'm not going to school," parents might discount that by saying, not everybody hates you, and of course you're just going to school. So what tends to happen is this goes round and round, right? Each person stepping on the other's toes, with Emmy being not accurate in what's happening, parents responding to that inaccuracy with some invalidating responses, which also make it really hard for Emmy to be accurate in the first place. Today, what we want to do is we want to help you all with some steps that might change this cycle, might allow for more accurate expression on Emmy's part and more validating responses on their parents' part. And when the parents are more validating, they might allow more accurate expression. And when Emmy's able to accurately express, parents can be more validating. So one of the first steps in being able to do this are some emotion self-management strategies. So I'm going to turn it over to Brianna now so that she can share those with you.
All right, so how do we get to validating responses? This is the million-dollar question. So I'm going to talk about 2 steps that we are critical in us taking before we can get to validating responses. And those 2 steps are emotion self-management and relationship mindfulness. So I'm going to first start with emotion self-management. So when I think of in emotion self-management in a nutshell is managing our own emotion first before we do anything else. When I think about emotion self-management, I think about being on an airplane when they're going over the safety protocols and they're instructing parents and caregivers to kind of put their own oxygen masks on first before they put on their child's oxygen mask. So take a moment to think about like why that might be the case. So ultimately, this is because when parents put their own oxygen masks on first, it then allows them to be more effective in putting on their child's masks. The same goes here, right? So if we want our kids to manage their own emotion more effectively and to be more skillful, we also need to manage our own emotion and be more skillful. So I'm going to talk about some strategies for helping us to be able to do that, because when our emotions are firing in these really unhelpful ways, right, it tends to kind of lead us to have some ineffective judgments or assumptions or interpretations or predictions about the situation or a child. And when we're trying to get to validating responses, this is actually something that's going to get in our way of being able to do that. Our exquisitely sensitive kids pick up on the slightest notes of judgment. It's kind of like a superpower that they have. Like they can, the slightest raise of an eyebrow, a change in their tone, a sigh, even a gentle sigh, they pick up on that. They notice that. And if we're trying to validate and we haven't first yet managed our own emotion, it's likely not going to feel very validating to our kids and may make things worse. So here are some strategies that we can take to help managing our own emotion. So the first is noticing rising arousal. So noticing anger as a signal. We put anger here because anger is one of these emotions that even when it does fit facts, acting on it may not be the most effective thing to do. So we want to first notice our anger as a signal, as a cue to kind of ask ourselves, what else might be going on here, right? So once we've noticed our anger, the next step is we notice the urges that might be attached to that anger. We know emotions have action urges or urges that are associated with them. For example, with anger, we may have the urge to attack in various ways. And so noticing urges such as yelling, such as storming out, such as making judgmental demands or criticisms, noticing these and actually not responding to them, refraining from acting on them. And so once we've noticed that emotion and we've refrained from acting on the emotion's urge and those judgments, we want to take a moment to identify our own primary emotion accurately. I know Alan already talked about this, and there's no way I'm going to top that, but I will give a brief description about what that is so we're all on the same page. So the primary emotion is oftentimes the emotion that is, it might not be the emotion that is felt first, even though it's called the primary emotion, but it's the emotion that fits the facts of the prompting event only, not in relation to any interpretations or judgments. These could be emotions like disappointment, sadness, confusion, low-level worry. And again, although they're called primary emotions, they're not necessarily the emotions that we notice or experience first. I'm going to come back to a helpful tip on how to identify primary emotions. But secondary emotions are the emotions that are in response to judgments, assumptions, and predictions that we might have about the prompting event and the primary emotion itself. They're oftentimes really big emotions such as panic and anger. And because they're so big, we tend to notice them first. And these are the emotions we tend to respond ineffectively to. And especially with anger, we know that like if we are trying to reduce conflict or get some collaborative problem solving, acting on anger is likely not going to get us there. So we want to identify our primary emotion. And an example of this, talking about Emmy. So Emmy, for example, has a history of school refusal. So let's say Emmy wakes up one morning and she's crying and she's expressing, I don't want to go to school. I can't go to school today. Because there is this history of school refusal, which can make it easy for our brains to get to judgments and anger. Parents may have the thought, oh, I can't believe this is happening again. Why can't she just go to school like every other child? The whole rest of the week is going to be like this. We're not going to be able to, like, I need to get to work, right? And so then we find ourselves in anger. Again, not so effective when we're trying to reduce conflict and get collaborative problem solving. So how do we identify the primary emotion? A helpful question to ask here is, if someone else's kid without a history, for example, of school refusal, woke up one morning and was crying and expressed not wanting to go to school, what might that parent feel? What emotion might that parent have? Right? So that parent might actually have some worry, like, oh my goodness, what happens? Like, typically go to school and now you're crying and telling me you don't want to go. What happened? They may feel worried, right? Different emotion than anger, different response than acting on anger. So once we've identified the primary emotion, in this example, some fear, some worry, some low-level worry, we want to treat the primary emotion. And we can treat the primary emotion by using some of our DBT strategies, so acceptance and change strategies. So for example, some self-soothe, some distraction, some cool temperature, some paced breathing. And we can also use some of our kind of change skills, some opposite actions, some accumulate positives, and our skills for reducing emotion vulnerability. So exercising, balanced sleep, focusing on our eating ahead of time. So these are some skills that we can use to manage that, to manage our primary emotion. And then we can get into some self-validation. So this is really communicating to ourselves that, like, why does it make sense for us that our emotion, that this is the emotion that we are experiencing? So for example, it's totally understandable, or it's completely understandable that I'm noticing feeling worried that my kid doesn't want to go to school, because most of the time she does, and she's really upset right now. Then we get into this last piece of relationship mindfulness, what I'm going to talk about in a couple of slides from now. So I'm going to put a pin in that. But once we've done all of these things, then we can say something. So again, in a nutshell, these are the various strategies that we can use to manage our emotion in that moment. Okay. So talking about anger again, anger, if it includes judgments, is corrosive in relationships. So anger is, in our relationships with our kids, anger can be really ineffective, right? So if we're trying to get to validating responses, which requires some willingness to understand from our child's experience and their perspective, why what they're experiencing makes sense for them. If we are being judgmental, right, and we're having assumptions about them and we're acting from a place of emotion, it's likely going to be really hard for us to be validating in that moment. So what does it look like if you're a visual person like me? You might be asking or thinking, what does this actually look like in relationships? What does it look like to be judgmental and angry? And this is it, right? So this is this like really famous waggy finger move where you were kind of like going like this and we're like, you need to go to school, for example. And so if we are doing this at somebody, or especially with our kids, right, and we're wagging our finger at them, what we are doing is we're actually in that moment not paying attention to that person's experience or that person. And we are instead solely paying attention to our own experience and how this person is making our experience difficult, right? And so this includes a lot of judgment. And if we're doing this, we're actually not being mindful of the other person. So this is the antithesis of mindfulness. And again, can be really, really damaging, especially in our relationships with our kids. So what is the antidote? The antidote is relationship mindfulness. So this is a super brief orientation on relationship mindfulness. I want to be very clear on that. This slide alone could be 45 minutes long, and we don't have that. So we are going to put our running shoes on and get right to the point. There are two parts of relationship mindfulness. The first part is paying attention on purpose right now without judgment to the other person. So the first step in doing this is describing rather than judging. So stick with the facts. So really kind of keeping it in the moment and sticking to the facts. So for example, my kid is telling me that they're upset and they really don't want to go to school. Or my kid is telling me that they are not wanting to go to school today. Sticking to the facts. The second piece here is staying in the present and not focusing on past events, which again, kind of connecting back to secondary emotion. If there's a history of a behavioral pattern occurring, it can be, our brains can quickly go there. Our brains can quickly go to all of the previous times and then what about the future times? Like, then what are we anticipating? So really staying in the moment and not focusing on past events. So again, this could be that thought like, oh, this is what we're going to be dealing with for the rest of the week now. Is this ever going to end? Right? Again, that is a thought that actually is going to increase our likelihood that we're going to be back in our emotion mind. So really staying in the present. The next piece is, what is it, this magical question, what is it like to be them right now? So really putting yourself in your child's shoes. This also allows us in those moments, those really difficult moments that I'm sure, you've all had, where you're like, I don't know what to do. And like, it's really hard for me to have compassion. This question really allows us to have compassion, to generate some compassion for our kids. And then the last piece here of the first part is, what do you know, even if they aren't expressing it right now, right? So connecting to what might be going on for them that they may not be saying out loud. So for example, okay, we know that Monday mornings are hard. She's got some conflict with her peers, and she's feeling left out. So it actually makes a lot of sense that it might be hard for her to get to school. Or for example, okay, I know she didn't complete her English homework the night before, and she's got English first thing in the morning. The last time this happened, the English teacher called her out and she felt so embarrassed. So, okay, I kind of understand like why it might be hard for my kid to get to school today. So this is really kind of that first part of relationship mindfulness, part one, paying attention on purpose without judgment and how to do that. The second part here is being effective rather than being self-righteous. So connecting to that this is someone you love and care about, right? Reminding yourself, okay, this is my child. I love them. I care about them. They mean so much to me. And staying mindful of what kind of relationship you want to have with your child and your long-term goal. So, okay, I want my child to be able to feel like they can come to me and share the things that are going on in their life, even when they may be difficult. I want my kid to want to spend time with me. I don't want to fight with my kid. I want to have a positive relationship with my kid. So this is step two. So we have paying attention on purpose without judgment is the first step. And then we have being effective over being right. That's step two. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us off the slides in a second. We're going to see a role play. And we're going to see some of the stuff that we talked about. And so just kind of a brief orientation. Again, Emmy, I know Armida oriented us all to Emmy. Emmy's a 10-year-old girl in 5th grade. She's experiencing suicidal ideation, self-harming behavior. Emmy has some conflicts with her peers at school. She has some school refusal. Mondays tend to be historically the hardest day for Emmy to kind of get back into school following the weekend. In addition to that, though, Emmy is also like a super funny kid. She is so creative. She loves to horseback ride. She is a very loyal friend. Within her relationship, she is incredibly, incredibly loyal. And she really wants to feel different. Like Emmy has a really big goal of managing her emotion and her behavior. She wants to feel and act differently. And what you're going to see is a transaction between Emmy and her parents. It's a common transaction that tends to happen on Monday mornings. And you will see that parents kind of start off on the unskillful side and tend to become more skillful throughout the role play. What I would like folks to do is to just jot down some observations of some unskillful behavior that they see, and then some of the skillful strategies that we've talked about so far. So make notes of some of the emotion self-management strategies that you noticed during this role play, and then make notes of some of the relationship mindfulness strategies that you are observing in this role play. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Emmy, let's get out of bed. This is the 3rd time that I've been up here in like the last 10 minutes. Let's go. Come on. I've got to get you to school, girl. Come on. So I've got to get to work. You told me last night, you promised that we're going to have no problems this morning.
I refuse.
Emmy, let's get out of bed. Come on. I cannot do this again. I can't do this again. Jessica, I need you up here now. I cannot get her out of bed. She's doing it again. I've got a meeting in like half an hour. I've got to get to Boston. I can't do this. I should do this now. Emmy, let's go. Emmy, leave me alone. Seriously, the bus is gonna be here in like 15 minutes. Jess, I need you now. Come on.
Jen, I'll be up there in 5 minutes.
No, I need you now. Jess. Emmy, I'm leaving. Your mom is gonna handle it.
Why can't you handle this? I am in the middle of stuff.
Sweetheart, I have to get to the office.
You always have to go to the office.
I have an important meeting. I cannot be late for the second time this week. I can't deal with this right now. I have to get to work. These are billable hours. They're critical.
Go. You're not helping her.
It's like sugar, get off the pie. You're gonna figure it out. Okay?
Just go. Just go. I will be the skillful one.
I'm done.
Bye.
I'm not going. I refuse to go.
Okay. It's not about her going to school. This is about figuring out what is going on. Mondays are always hard for her. Okay, I just want to get the kid out of bed. Let me start there.
Jess,
Sweet face. Go to work.
Yeah, I got in the car and I realized I totally lost it.
Yeah, you did.
And I left you
every
hanging
morning.
here,
Thank you.
and that was not fair. And
Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
I know Mondays are hard, and your work is just as important, and I know you're just as stressed out. So I wanted to come back in here and like figure out how to.
Oh my gosh, she is having
so.
such a hard time this morning.
I know, and I don't know what it is.
I have some ideas, not 100% sure, but I don't think we're getting her to school. I think we start with just getting her to like try to talk to us and figure out what's going on.
I mean, as much as I obviously want her to go to school, and this is creating
she's
a
at
lot
right
of
now.
pressure for us, I do agree. I don't think this is where she's at right now.
So, all right, we need to go in there. We need to just take school off the table for the moment, not the day, the moment, and just see if we can get her to try something to stop crying.
Okay.
Is that where we're at?
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, so many skillful and unskillful moments in there that I'm sure you've all observed. And in the spirit of time, I am not going to go through each one of these pieces, but instead just highlight a couple of things that we noticed in our role play. So we notice is Jess using the stop skill. So she stopped herself, She took some deep breaths. She actually took a step back. We saw her observe facts out loud and use some relationship mindfulness. What is it like to be Emmy? What do I know to be true about the situation with Emmy? Which actually then allowed her to get reoriented to the goal of validation before problem solving. We then also saw Jen come up after taking some time in her car, probably likely using some deep breaths, but she came up much more regulated. We saw Jess and Jen stay mindful of one another in their relationship. And then we saw them kind of connect and make a plan for how they wanted to lead with validation for the next time that they go into Emmy's room and talk with her. So now that we've gone through all of this, the 2 steps, so emotion management, mindfulness, I am going to pass it over to Allison, who will go through the why bother and then how to validate.
Thanks, Brianna. We've heard the word validation an awful lot today. And before I even go into my slides, I want to kind of give the cheat sheet on how I advise what validation is. And when I think of validation, the advice I give is it's any communication, whether it is verbal or nonverbal, that tells the other person that what they're feeling makes sense. It's not that we approve of that emotion. It's not that their emotion seems to be, right on target and like it makes sense. It's not that we are trying to have them feel better or have relief from that emotion. When we are validating, what we are doing is the goal of communicating that their emotion makes sense.
Bye.
Excuse me. I'm going to open bear with me as I try to open my screen share for a moment. Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay. So let's talk about why validate. There's 2 sides. We're talking about the kids and the parents. We just saw Emmy and we just saw Jen and Jess. And for validation, to kind of get to that place where we can communicate that Emmy's emotions make sense. What's in it for Emmy is that it will help reduce her arousal. She's pretty stressed out this Monday morning. She is very clear she's not going to school. And we want to help soothe her emotion, help her kind of reduce the intensity of what she's feeling that Monday morning. Another benefit of validation is that it builds trust between parent and child. It improves the relationship by communicating that we get that emotion, that we understand where the child's coming from. It's a way of connecting with our child and helps strengthen that relationship. And the third one, this is a pretty important one. This is it models self-validation. Now, when we have kids who are exquisitely sensitive, and what we mean by that is that they feel things and they feel them really big. And sometimes as they get older, it's going to be on them to learn how to regulate that emotion. And modeling self-validation, how to communicate to yourself that your emotion makes sense, in the long run will help reduce the intensity, reduce that arousal on their own. So for kids, having a family system where it can model self-validation, kind of communicating what's valid in this experience is incredibly important. Now, if we shift gears, we talk about for the parents, what it does is it reduces our reactivity. So in the same way that we're going to be, in the same way that it's going to be slowing down their child's reactivity, it's also going to be slowing down our reactivity. It brings us right into that present moment, helps us kind of be in focus, in touch with what's going on with our child, and it reduces our judgments, those secondary emotions that are going on. If we can kind of get into that zone and talk about in that moment what's going on with our child, we are more likely to be able to validate and be less likely to be judgmental. And by doing that, the icing on the cake here is it increases the likelihood for continued conversation and collaborative problem solving between child and parent, right? So what you didn't see in that video were opportunities for conversation. When Jen was trying to get Emmy out of bed, and by the way, these are fictionalized characters, when that was happening, it was really, they were almost polarized. Emmy was not getting out of bed, Jen was not validating, and there was an opportunity for a conversation of what was going on. And what you'll see in the next clip is an opportunity where validation was at play. So, since there's so many wonderful aspects of validation, and you're all here, you're giving up your Friday, you're on kind of hour 6 of sitting on your screen. My suspicion is that so many of you are like, yes, please, I'd like to validate more. And you're probably intending to do so or have made efforts in the past to do so. And this slide highlights actually what makes it hard or what makes it difficult to validate. My assumption here is if you could, you would. And we should identify that there are kind of factors that might get in the way of of your ability to do so, even though you may want to or be well-intended. So take a look at this list. I'll go through them relatively quickly. If there's one on there that stands out, first of all, I hope it's a validation for you that it may, this happens so often that it's on the list. And the other part is it's an opportunity for you to remember, like, okay, this is kind of a universal piece. This happens to everybody. So one of the pieces that makes it hard to validate is our own distress. Our own emotions may be so heightened that we're not able to get to kind of what we call our wise mind space to be able to validate. Or our own disorder, our own health may be distressed, so that it makes it harder for us to get to a place where we can validate. Our patterns, look, we are skilled at pushing each other's buttons in our family systems, right? And we get into these patterns and we get into these habits where, person says A, person says B, and you saw this. What did Jen say? She's doing it again. It's this pattern. It's her reflex. And on Monday morning, this is a stressed out family system. And she may have forgotten that Monday mornings are so incredibly hard for Emmy. So our bad habits and the patterns that we get into, once activated, get really hard for us to hit that pause button, come back into the moment. And we kind of forget that this is the person that we love. This is the person who's struggling. And this is the person who may need something different from us. Other things that might get in the way of our ability to validate is those secondary emotions and those judgments that come with them. The idea that you should be getting out of bed today. The idea that it's wrong for you to stay in bed. Your job is to go to school. If that's going on, that is your red flag, then you're holding on to those beliefs. And it's going to be super hard to validate in that moment. Now, Brianna talked earlier about anger. Anger is pervasive. We all have anger. We have anger that comes out in different ways. When it is there, it can be toxic. It can keep us from saying the kind or the validating things that we intend to say. And instead, we may impulsively say things that are invalidating. So poor self-expression and accurate expression. Emmy was not necessarily being accurate in what was going on. She was clear she was not going to school. We don't understand what she was feeling. We don't understand why she was feeling it. We don't understand, did something happen? Right? Had she given us more information, we might have had more information to validate. So there is a piece where when we don't have a lot to work on, it's harder to validate, which is of course connected with that lack of understanding. When we don't understand the big picture or the majority of the picture, it becomes harder to validate. And the last two are these kind of poor conflict management skills, which is that bad habits that I talked about, and our lack of acceptance, meaning that in this moment, we've got other things in the agenda, other things we're moving to, and therefore it's really hard to come back into that very moment and do the validation that's being called for. So how do you get there? If we talk about your steps for the validating response, right? We can't just walk in. You saw Jen in that door when she was like, Josh, she's doing it again. It would be really hard for her to just turn the light switch off and go for it and say validating response. It's not what she's at. So the first piece is to manage our own emotions. That we want to be in a space where we can observe what's going on for us, observe what emotion is going on, question ourselves if it's primary or secondary. You heard Alan talking about that as well. And then move into our relationship mindful. And that's that critical piece Brianna was talking about, is reminding yourself that this is a person that you love. And this is the person that you want to be able to understand differently, which brings you to the understanding piece. This requires us to remember that we're going to be curious. I like the words gentle and curious because we're going to want to know, like, what happened that got Emmy here? What happened that got our child to a place where they're having a tough time this morning or this afternoon? And then when we've gone through our own emotion check, our relationship mindfulness, our own gentle curiosity, then we can have that validating response. And when we do validate, which you're going to see in the upcoming video, it's going to be about validating what's valid, kind of where it makes sense, and might, as I started saying, might communicate to Emmy that what she's feeling makes sense. So this is not the room that we left Emmy in, is it? We're kind of on that chatting. And this is kind of where we're hoping everybody will be able to go. And this is with our clinical work, what we're striving for is that validating sees the other person's negative emotion. And in doing so, here's that transaction, invites a more regulated response and gives you more accurate expression. As I'm a bit mindful of the time, I want to let you know that there are 6 options for validating. You will see some of them coded, and I'm going to do a quick run through. This is, oh my gosh, on and of itself, a 45-minute talk. Y'all probably have seen this before or have been curious or Googled it. I'm going to do this in a really quick way. Here's my shortcuts. Levels 1, 2, and 3, they're really options 1, 2, and 3, are when you don't have a lot to go on. 4, 5, and 6 is when you have more accurate expression. And so different situations may call for different types of validation, and you are going to be kind of skilled on it. So real quick, level 1 is putting your phone down, looking your child in the eye and having accurate eye contact and kind of being interest. We call it staying awake. Level 2 is accurate reflection. This is when you only repeat back what your child says. You do not attach your meaning to it. You repeat back what it is your child said. And the pro tip I have for you here is please follow up with, is that right? To make sure that you heard it as your child was communicating it. Level 3, gentle curiosity, or option 3. I think of this one as kind of our old school, so I hear you're angry. And this is that you have some curiosity or some ideas about what might be going on, but you're going to ask a clarifying question to understand their experience better. And that may sound like, help me understand. Did I get it? What am I missing? And as I said, once you have more information, 4, 5, and 6 is a different type of validation where we can validate based on the past. That makes sense. Mondays are tough. Mondays are always tough. Based on circumstances, it makes sense. You may not want to go to school today. I get it. You didn't do your homework, and I would want to avoid my teacher too. And level 6 is inherently that our child have the capacity to understand and to hear what we're about to say, that we're not going to fragilize them. So those are our 6 kind of options for validation. We're going to click to another video with Emmy right now. And you're going to see Jess and Jen come into the room in a more skillful position than we left them. And go ahead and jot down where you see them being more skillful and kind of what resonates for you.
Sweetie, what's going on? Emmy, what is going on here? Okay.
I'm not going to school. I refuse to go to school. You can't make me go to school.
Okay. Before we talk about it anymore, why don't we take a deep breath together?
Yeah. No, I'm not taking a deep breath. I told you I'm not going to.
Mom and I are going to take a deep breath.
I know about this. It's deep breath in school. No.
Another deep breath. I think we'll take it with us. Okay. Maybe a 3, 2, 1.
That's what I'm thinking. So I think we need a little bit more.
Okay. Okay. I mean, we're gonna do a 3, 2, 1.
Would you like to do it with us? Okay.
Okay.
Well, do you want to start?
Yeah. Why don't we start with 3 things purple? Your favorite color.
No, I don't have.
Okay. 1 of the 3. This will do. Yep. This beautiful purple color.
I know the one she chose. I'm gonna go with the purple sign on the wall.
And I am going to go with the purple book right behind you.
I don't even like purple today.
Okay. On our 2, do you want to pick the color?
Yeah, do I pick the color?
If not purple, what is the color today?
You choose.
Okay. Let's go blue.
I'm going blue. Water bottle.
And then I'm going to do this Lion King pillow. This
kind of
Simba. Yeah.
That's not blue.
Oh, it's not?
No.
Are you kidding?
That's turquoise.
Oh, okay. I guess I can see that.
Okay.
Well,
name another blue then.
What's another
you
blue?
find the blue.
What's another blue?
The flag.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Do you want to pick the last color?
Yellow.
Yeah.
Really?
Wow.
You're giving me a
We
guess.
got poo.
It's poo.
It is poo.
Were you thinking of poo when you said yellow?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so.
So
Okay, I'm darling. What's going on? You
I
seem
know
really
that,
sad.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
and we know that Mondays are really, really hard. And
They're so hard.
you know what I was thinking? I know there has been some stuff with Becky that's going on.
Oh,
gosh,
no,
yes.
I don't want to talk about Becky.
And I'm really curious, sweetheart. Was there something that happened over? I know you guys were hanging out over the weekend. Was there something that happened that might be making it hard to go to school today?
She's at school.
She's at school.
I don't want to go to school and see her being BFF with Lori.
Good girl. Okay. Emmy, are you just... Listen, she's always been such a hard friend. Are you feeling really sad about this friendship right now? Chance?
I feel so sad. I just can't handle how sad I feel.
Any chance?
And I don't want to go to school. Going to school makes it worse.
Especially if she's clicking with Laura.
Yeah.
You must be feeling
sweetie.
kind of left out if she's clicking with Laura.
It's so sad because we were friends and now it's like I don't matter.
Ugh.
Okay, so it's Monday morning, which are universally always
Oh,
really hard.
I hate Mondays.
And now we have going to school and the idea of feeling so alone because Becky's now buddying up with Lori.
Yeah.
So of course you don't want to go. That makes
It
total
makes
sense.
so much sense, sweetheart.
So let's put a pin in going to school, and maybe we start with just kind of getting out of bed and talking to me and Mom about it.
Yeah.
So, can I, like, stop going to school?
Right now, sweetie, the goal is actually Mom and I just want to understand more about, like, what's going on for you.
Yeah, I didn't
That's our
realize
goal.
something went down this weekend with Becky. I want to just hear about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And we know Monday mornings are tough, so we actually got your favorite blueberry cake. It's downstairs. We thought you'd want like a
Blueberry coffee
Yep.
cake.
Really?
Yes!
Okay.
You gonna do that with us? Come downstairs, talk to us a little bit.
We also got some fresh fruit from the farm so that we could make some smoothies because we know that you do enjoy a fresh smoothie in the
Can I
morning.
help make it?
I would love for you to help me.
So,
And I'm not going to school.
not right this second.
Not right this second. Our goal is we want to go downstairs and we want to understand a little bit more about what's going on. Okay?
Let's figure it out if it makes sense to go today, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right, let's
Ready?
go, kid.
So you could see there are significant differences between the first interaction with Emmy and the second interaction with Emmy. To that point, I'm going to introduce Victoria Shepherd, Emmy, to bring everything together and really kind of frame some of what we presented today.
Thank you, Allison. All right, so before I bring back the slides, I just want to start by acknowledging the change between transactions shown in video 1 and video 2. In the first video, emotions were high, voices and crying were loud, and overall effectiveness and closeness were pretty low. So how did this family get to the point in the second video where there were increases in accurate expression and increases in validation? A round of applause for Jess and Jen. Jess and Jen prioritized managing their emotions. They did this before they went back in the bedroom, right? And they did it again once they got in the bedroom when they were on the bed. That was a slight shift in plan where it's like, you know what? Now's the time for some deep breathing. And this was also modeling, right? Modeling skill use in front of Emmy, inviting for skill use, modeling, inviting for the 3-2-1. They also prioritized relationship mindfulness, right? We are in this together, as well as this is our lovely daughter, you know, and she is really, really struggling right now. And they prioritized the goal to understand, in contrast to the goal in the first video, which was to go, 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 right? So that being said, and I'm going to bring the slides up now. Here we go. Through prioritizing those steps, managing their emotions, relationship mindfulness, as well as the goal to understand, Jess and Jen were able to use validation options, were able to access those options. They were able to listen, which really wasn't happening earlier on in the first video. They were able to normalize. Mondays are hard for everyone in this family, let's be real. And they were able to explore with curiosity. They were able to ask questions like, you know, I know that you hung out with Becky this weekend. Did something happen? Something that might be getting in the way and making going to school really hard? Are you feeling sad right now based on what was just shared? So we know that as validation went up, so did accurate expression. Emmy became more accurate. Instead of, no, you can't make me, with insistence, Emmy explained details about how she was feeling left out and how that influenced her strong, very strong desire to avoid school, to not go to school. So with more validation, as this slide shows, with more accurate expression, we were also seeing more closeness. And that's sort of how the cycle is continuing and reinforcing each other. And so some tips. I know we're getting near the end, and so we're going to leave you with some tips. validation is context dependent. And so what I mean by that is validation that worked well today. Of course, seeing Becky at school is going to make being at school really, really hard. That might not work next Monday, right? It might not be relevant next week. Feeling left out with Becky might not be a factor, right? There might be something else. So validation is context dependent. Validate the valid. And so with validate the valid, we want to really think about validating emotions, right? Because all emotions are valid, and ensuring that we're not validating something that's invalid. There was a time in the second clip where Emmy commented on how she just can't handle it. She just can't go to school. Notice that parents did not jump in that moment and attempt to validate that. That actually would have been pretty invalidated, as it would have fragilized Emmy. Avoid following validation with problem solving, right? So often there can be an urge to jump right to problem solving, and especially after maybe doing a little bit of validation, noticing that some emotions are indeed going down, and then trying to segue into problem solving. And doing that too soon, as also shown in the second video, there was a moment where we're talking about school came on the table, and Emmy's emotions started kind of getting she's getting a little bit escalated. Notice that parents regrouped and were flexible and were willing to fall back on validation instead of proceeding forward with problem solving. And last, being realistic with expectations. Jess and Jen want Emmy to go to school. However, in this moment, on this particular day, going to school wasn't happening. And so having willingness to be flexible with expectations and just, again, trying to go back to, I really want to understand, that's what's going to be more realistic for being effective in the moment. And last, we leave y'all with a quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, which summarizes many of the concepts that we discussed here today. Thank you all for your participation today. I know we went a little bit over. We are so glad that you're here with us today.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye all. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope this was helpful. Bye, everyone. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.